Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In section 1 of his Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding, David Hume is going to make a defense of what he there is calling metaphysics. Now, I do have to caution that you want to be kind of careful. Metaphysics is one of those terms that doesn't have just one single fixed consensus meaning across all of the history of philosophy or culture. By the way, anybody who tries to tell you that it does is either misinformed or lying to you. So we want to be attentive to what Hume is actually calling metaphysics here, which is a bit broader than what you might think of if you are associating it on the one hand with the academic discipline of metaphysics within philosophy with its own literature and specialists and textbooks and things like that, or with the sort of, metaphysics that you'll find in various bookstore sections where it's more about crystals and things like that, the occult and all that. Hume doesn't mean that, and he doesn't just mean what we typically call academic metaphysics. Now, he is going to associate metaphysics with what he calls the abstruse or abstract or difficult philosophy that he's already distinguished from the easy or popular philosophy. And he is going to look at why it is that we need to provide some sort of defense of metaphysics. So he is going to tell us that a number of people are going to reject metaphysics altogether. And we could think about people who have done this in the 20th century, even going into the 21st century. We have to ask, what do they mean by metaphysics? So the quote here that's really important, he says, "Were the generality of mankind contented to prefer the easy philosopher to the abstract and profound without throwing any blame or contempt on the latter, it might not be improper to comply with this general opinion and allow every person to enjoy without opposition his own taste and sentiment. But," here's where the problem is, "the matter is often carried further even to the absolute rejecting of all profound reasonings, or what is commonly called metaphysics. So what we need to do is," he says, "consider what can be reasonably pleaded in their behalf." Metaphysics understood as a sort of plural there, right? So how can we actually defend metaphysics as an activity, as a kind of potential science? Later on, he's going to say metaphysics isn't yet a science. So he's going to give you a number of different considerations, arguments in favor of metaphysics. He says we can begin with observing one considerable advantage which results from the accurate and abstract philosophy is its subservience to the easy and humane, which without the former, accurate and abstract philosophy, can never attain a sufficient degree of exactness in its sentiments, precepts, or reasonings. All polite letters are nothing but pictures of human life in various attitudes and situations, and inspire us with different sentiments of praise or blame, admiration or ridicule, according to the qualities of the object which they set before us. An artist must be better qualified to succeed in this understanding, who besides a delicate taste and quick apprehension, possesses an accurate knowledge of the internal fabric, the operations of the understanding, the workings of the passions, and going on. So, if you want to do the easy philosophy well, you really do need some abstract philosophy to give more rigor, to give information to your endeavors within the easy philosophy. And so that's, a good reason why you shouldn't just throw metaphysics completely away, at least in the Humean sense here, right? He'll go on and give another one. And this is a little bit, of an interesting argument building off of the first. He says, we may observe in every art or profession, even those which most concern life or action, a spirit of accuracy, however required, carries all of them nearer their perfection. Okay, so if you have an art and you want it to be better, so now we're not just doing a particular, study, we're doing an entire discipline or art. If you want it to be better, you need to be accurate with things. But notice what he says next. He tells us it renders them, the arts or professions, more subservient to the interests of society. So what would be examples of this? He's going to give us a few. The politician will acquire greater foresight and subtlety in the subdividing and balancing of power. A politician, statesperson, becomes a better administrator of the state. The lawyer, more, here we go. The lawyer, more method and finer principles in his reasonings. He's going to do law better. In the general, more regularity in his discipline, more caution in his plans and operations. And Hume says the stability of modern governments above ancient and the accuracy of modern philosophy have improved by similar gradations. So by incorporating the accurate, abstract, abstruse philosophy, you're actually going to make society as a whole better by improving the arts and professions. The third justification that he gives is a very, very interesting one, isn't it? Because he says, let people do metaphysics. They're not going to hurt anybody with it. As a matter of fact, for those who can enjoy it, and we'll talk about that in a moment, he says, it's one of the most safe and harmless pleasures bestowed on the human race. The sweetest and most inoffensive path of life leads through the avenues of science and learning. Why? Because people doing metaphysics, they stay out of everybody's way. They hide themselves in their study or the library. They get together with a few of their buddies. But, they're totally unconnected to real life, as we would call it. So they're not going to screw up anything for anybody or themselves. And he talks about this as the gratification of an innocent curiosity. Now, this only works for people who actually like doing moral philosophy or metaphysics in the sense that Hume is talking about here. And he says, these researches may appear painful and fatiguing. It is with some minds as with some bodies. Some bodies are endowed with vigorous and florid health, and they require severe exercise and reap a pleasure from what to the generality of mankind may seem burdensome and laborious, right? So some of us have stronger intellects, and we need to exercise them. For those people, let them do metaphysics, right? And he also goes on and he says, obscurity is painful to the mind as well to the eye, but to bring light from obscurity by whatever labor must needs be delightful and rejoicing. So if you actually make some progress, well, that feels good, doesn't it? So that's an interesting argument. And then we get to you could say, deeper conversation where Hume is really laying his cards on the table about his own project. So he says that, another criticism that you could make, the justest and most plausible objection against a considerable part of metaphysics is that it's not properly a science, but instead is kind of an indulgence in something that we don't want to encourage. So he's saying a lot of what we call metaphysics is actually coming from one of two sources. And what are those? The fruitless efforts of human vanity, which would penetrate into subjects utterly inaccessible to the understanding. So Hume thinks that a good bit of what passes as metaphysics is indeed that. Human vanity, people who think they're smarter than they are, thinking that they're going to penetrate into subjects where we can't really make any real progress. And, there's probably a lot of that at any given point in time of history with people not only doing metaphysics, but doing other kinds of studies as well. And then he talks about religion, and he's specifically talking about superstition. So he says, they arise from the craft of popular superstitions, which, being unable to defend themselves on fair ground, raise these entangling brambles to cover and protect their weakness. Chased from open country, these robbers fly into the forest and lie in wait to break on every unguarded avenue of the mind and overwhelm it with religious fears and prejudices. So this is actually a big problem in Hume's time, as it is in other times of history. Enthusiasm, superstition, taking religion and trying to make everybody else conform to it. Well, that's where you do get some of the metaphysics of the time from. And Hume is going to say, okay, so does that mean we should give up metaphysics? And he says, no, we should draw the opposite conclusion, right? Is this a sufficient reason why philosophers should desist from such researches and leave superstition in possession of her retreat? Is it not proper to draw an opposite conclusion and perceive the necessity of carrying the war into the most secret recesses of the enemy? Instead, if the problem is we've got bad metaphysics, let's do good metaphysics. Let's replace it with what he calls true metaphysics, right? Why should we not improve metaphysics so that it can actually become a science? Now, if you look at what he's calling metaphysics here, part of it is actually what we would nowadays call philosophical psychology, and a good part of it is what he's calling moral philosophy as well, which includes ethics, but also a study of our drives, the human emotions, how practical reasoning works or doesn't work, all of these sorts of matters, right? And he's going to say that we need to inquire into the nature of human understanding so that we can actually generate a true metaphysics, which is not yet, at least in Hume's time, fully attained. Maybe fragments of it are there. Hume thinks that he is actually developing something like that in the Enquiry, and also did so in his earlier work in the treatise. So this amounts to a defense of a certain kind of metaphysics, a certain understanding of metaphysics, against its critics, which might include people coming after Hume who are also rejecting metaphysics for similar reasons.